What's up guys, it's Ludski. So today we have a 2018 JL here with a 2.0 turbo. Gonna be installing an S&B cold air intake into these guys. So one benefit behind doing a cold air intake is these larger filters. This is a wet filter. Downside is you do have to maintain it. The plus side is the wet filters actually get more airflow going into it. I personally have this one in my Jeep and it makes an unreal difference. Plus, it actually makes it so you can hear that turbo. Super good plus to it, helps the miles per gallon. A lot easier to maintain than the factory ones, and it's also a lot cheaper overall. So you do have to make it, upfront cost, usually around $300 for these guys. But then if you had the factory ones, you actually have to remove your air filter and replace it every 5,000 to 10,000 miles, and it's about 15 to 20 bucks each time. Adds up real quickly. So first thing you want to do for these guys, always, because we are playing with electronics, go ahead and disconnect the negative battery terminal. Just peel it off, put it off to the side. It's a 10 millimeter, that guy will get it off. The next step we're gonna do is start disconnecting the sensors that go to these guys. So first you're gonna have a little plastic clip that's right here, super easy to get off. Just pop it off with a panel popper or 2 screwdrivers or a flathead or whatever you wanna use. You're gonna go ahead and then just to start disconnect sensors like this guy. The more difficult one is these two right here. So this is super crucial. This is why it took so long for the 2.0 to actually get a turbo. the intake for it. These are actually, everything's so technologically advanced in these guys that you have to have proper air pressures at all times. So this guy talks to the communicates with the computer, sorry. One thing for it, it's got 2 little gray tabs on both sides. You only see it on one, but it also affects the other side. You have to go ahead, squeeze it, and it takes a little bit of strength and to pop it off. So it actually has 2 pieces. Once you press one, it'll kind of push towards the other side. Pull it off. Do the same thing with the bottom one. Push it and then pull it off. So we're gonna go ahead and get those guys removed first. Next step, we're gonna start removing the actual intake, the tubing, the filter. First thing to go for, you have 2 10 millimeter bolts that are gonna be right there. We're gonna get those guys out. You'll have a third one on the other side of this intake, just sitting right there. Then we're also gonna remove these 2 clamps. First clamp's gonna be right here. Second clamp is gonna be right there. They're 8 millimeters. Just go ahead, get those guys removed. So let's go ahead and use a hand tool for it, and we'll get those guys removed real quick. All right, one thing that's super important, on the bottom of this guy, you have these 2 rubber grommets. You're gonna go ahead and pull them off. It's just gonna pop off past a little lip. It takes a little bit of brain power, evidently. And you wanna take them, and if you look down here, you're gonna see these 2 open holes. Your new intake is gonna sit into those 2 holes. That's what holds it into the bottom. Just put them back into place, super easy. Just kind of something you want to remember, otherwise your intake's not going to sit right, and you're going to try to figure out what's going on, and you have to pull it all apart just to put in 2 simple grommets. All right guys, so next step we're going to take off, we have a couple 10 millimeter bolts we need to remove. First one is going to be the bracket that goes to the side of the battery. There's 2 overall bolts that go into it. You're gonna leave this first one and go to the one closest to the actual fender itself. So remember the outer one. And then we're also gonna go ahead and remove these 2 bolts right here onto this turbo resonator piece. We also need to disconnect these plastic clips so that way we can access everything and get it swapped over to the new one. So we'll go ahead and get those guys removed here. All right guys, next step is to actually remove this little turbo and resonator piece right here. So Fiat decided not to use a generic clamp for this, so it doesn't have an 8mm bolt head like the rest of them do. This one's actually one that goes on. They have a little notches that go around, and then they bend it so it forces it together. Way to get this guy off is you're actually gonna take your, like a needle node or a wire cutter, and it takes a little bit of time and pressure to do it, but you're gonna work your way through this piece, and you're actually gonna cut it loose, and then once it's off, you'll be able to break this guy enough to where it's gonna pop off. We're just go ahead and just slide that guy off the intake manifold altogether. All right, now that we got this guy removed, took a little bit, but I'm just taking my wire cutters. You see I didn't even cut all the way through. All I did was jam it in as much as I could and twist enough until where this lost pressure on its little notch pops right off. Throw that away, get this guy off, we won't be reusing him. All right guys, so next up, we're gonna go back to that factory tubing. You have a sensor that's inside here. So this is one guy you gotta be kind of careful with because it's a little bit brittle to get it out. And one thing to take note with, if you have to take a picture of it with your phone, just to focus and remember this, you see how this piece is long ways, is going perpendicular to the tube, and then the shorter side is going parallel with it. Remember that, because when you put that new sensor back into the new intake tubing, it has to be the same way. There's a little hole that goes inside, and that's for the airflow to actually go. So we're gonna take it, turn it counterclockwise here, half a turn. There's a little lip on here. You just have to kind of nudge it over just a little bit. Goes right over with the piece that sticks out, and then just pull it out. Takes a little bit of pressure. But like I said, on the inside is some tubing. So if you were to put it in this way and not rotate it, that air is not gonna hit that little blue sensor that's on the inside there. Let's see if I can get it. That little blue guy that's right there has to go with the airflow. So if you leave it and you forget to rotate it, it's not gonna get enough and your Jeep's gonna think something's wrong with it. So we're gonna take him, set him off to the side, don't let him get bent. The thing to take notice is the new grommet that goes into place onto your aftermarket tubing. It's got a little notch that goes in. It's got a little notch that sticks out. You're literally just gonna press that guy into it, into the spot where it needs to be. You see how it has these marks right here? It's the same concept as that other one. You rotate it against it and it helps hold it in place. So we're gonna take the new one, get it into place. All right guys, you remember those two sensors that we had down here earlier? What we're gonna do is actually get those mounts that go back into the S&B tubing. So S&B actually gave us some aluminum ones that they had made for this. The original ones are plastic, prone to breaking, so this is kind of a nice upgrade over time because you know that the heat from the engine will affect that plastic, so this is kind of a nice way to upgrade per se. They do have specific ones they go into. If you don't know which one it is, just look at them and then look at the parts. You're gonna realize that only one can go into one hole, one goes into the other. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hand tighten these guys on first. You don't need these guys at 1,000,000 foot-pounds. You don't need to use a tool to actually get it down with the torque wrench onto it. We're just gonna hand tighten until it doesn't go anymore. Don't worry if the threading is still showing, that's fine, the threading's only so deep. We're gonna take a crescent wrench and just do 1 to 2 turns additional to what was already there. Just get it nice and snug. Doesn't need to be crazy tight. Next part, we're gonna go ahead and grab our actual new box and we're gonna start assembling that together with all the seals. All right guys, next step is assembling the actual air box itself. So we're gonna go ahead, we have our new seals, and you're gonna see round goes to round, square goes to square. So we're gonna go ahead, on the inside there's a little groove, you're just gonna see it pops right into it. Super easy. Seal always goes to the bigger part is on the outside, and just work your way around, pressing it in as you go. And it's gonna fit snug all the way around on this side where it's flat. Next side kind of has a backwards D. So we're gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing and get that guy into place. A little bit more difficult because it has, you know, corners and rounded edges. You're just gonna go ahead and keep pressing until, just like the other one, it fits smoothly all the way around. Next step is you see that there's a hole right here. It has a nutsert that was pressed into place. That guy is gonna be for this bracket. It's one of the mounting brackets that we removed earlier. You're gonna see where that comes into play in just a moment. You're gonna take that bracket, make sure that this bend is going away from your actual seal. S&B supplied you with some metric bolts. It's got a 10mm head onto it. So we're just gonna go ahead, use one of those bolts with the washer, hand tighten as much as we can. And then we're gonna go ahead and tighten it down just a little bit. Remember, this is going into plastic. It doesn't need to be super tight. That guy's on there, it's not going anywhere. If you over tighten it, you may have to do some fine tuning to kind of line it up with the hole. So we don't want to go ahead and over tighten it to the fact that we can't move it. We have to pull it all apart and go backwards. The next part is going to be the seal for the top of the box. Around here is this little lip that goes across. Purpose behind it is actually gonna help block off all the heat that comes through here. If you get any splash that comes up through your fender well, if you have open fenders or if you have some vented ones that are right there. So we have to put this piece into it. S&B supplies you with one, but it is not the right size. They just kind of cut a generic length. What you're gonna do is you're just going to actually just press it into this on one end. It's kind of nice to start in the middle, that way you can figure out where the end is a little bit easier, and just work your way around. If you have to trim, do so. Just make sure when you cut it, try to get them as close as possible. If you have a gap in there, that's an air gap that's gonna come through. Because later, we're gonna install our cover that goes over to it, and it's gonna press down onto that guy. So it's nice to know that everything is secure and it's gonna be airtight for it. Next, we're actually gonna put the air box into the Jeep. So you remember those two holes that we stuck these grommets into? One on this side, one on this side, where you're gonna see that there's two pieces that stick out on this air box. Do the math, it's gonna line right up to it. This bracket with that hole that we just put on is gonna line up with that one bolt that we took off earlier. So we're gonna go ahead, fit everything in. And like I said, keep in mind, if you have aftermarket electronics or anything, be wary of those as you're trying to fit this guy in there, because it is a tight fit. Once you have it into place, go ahead and take that 10mm that we took out earlier, and we're gonna go ahead and place it in. All right guys, so we got it into place. I went ahead and started to just hand thread a little bit of that bolt into there. If you have a winch or anything like that, it's gonna be a tight fit. If you drop it, it's not the end of the world. We know how to put this in. We'll just lift it out, grab that piece back, and start over again. So we're gonna go ahead and get him tightened up. Just needs to be snug. We're not sitting here putting suspension on. Snug into place. That guy's not gonna go anywhere on this end. Has movement on this side, that's okay. It's gonna help us when we're trying to get this tube that actually goes inside. So next step is we're actually gonna put this guy into the Jeep. Now, it is a little bit of a tight fit, and you have to keep in mind, be wary of this guy right here. If we break him off, we're gonna have a bad time. So if it helps and you wanna remove it, go ahead and do so. We can put it back in later, because remember, this clip is gonna go right into it, so we'll be able to access it pretty easily. Way to do it, these are gonna go back into our sensors that are right here. So just keep that in mind as we're pressing everything together. If you feel like it's not lining up correctly, that'll give you an idea. So go ahead, get this guy placed in with it upright to where these are pointed forward. Give it a little bit of a twisting motion. It'll start to go, rotate it down into place. These guys are gonna start lining up to where they need to be. You're gonna just place this guy, let him sit there for a split second. So we're just gonna go ahead, place him onto that factory rubber hose. We're not gonna put it onto the tubing because the tubing goes inside of the hose. and then go ahead and rotate it just to where you can easily access it later when we need to actually tighten it down. So that guy is on there. Now we're just gonna fit this tubing right into it. It's gonna go snug into place, and you're gonna see everything starting to line up in place of where it needs to be. We're not gonna tighten this just yet. We're gonna leave it on. We're gonna go ahead and start to fasten everything together that needs to be in there. So the reason I'm not tightening this is just in case we need to rotate this a little bit more to able to access everything. We're gonna plug everything back in that we took out earlier. So first one, we're gonna start with these sensors. Remember how easy it was to get out? It's the same concept to go in. We're gonna press until you hear that pop. That means it's in place. That one didn't pop, but I went ahead and pressed it, moved it past it. If you're not sure if it's in or not, because you see a lot of metal still showing, just go ahead and pull that guy. It's not gonna go anywhere. We're gonna take our sensor that we had unplugged, go ahead and clip him back in. And then we're gonna take these 2 bolts that we removed earlier, those 2 smaller black ones. They're actually gonna go right back in and tighten that guy back down. Remember, this is not a structural part. It does not need to go on tight. If you over tighten it, you can crack the plastic, you can spin something, and you're gonna have a bad time. We got those fastened into place. We're gonna go ahead, grab that 10mm that we used earlier. And just do the final little snug torque onto this. Next, we're gonna go ahead and grab that 8mm that we had earlier, get this guy tightened into place. Now, if you accidentally earlier did not put it into a good spot where you can fit this size socket into it, say for example, it's a little bit tight, I can't get to it, it's not the end of the world. You don't have to disassemble everything. Go ahead and just grab a flathead. It's got a crease that goes into it, and we're just gonna stick it in and just get that guy tightened down. Remember, all we're doing is creating a seal so it has a vacuum seal and it's not taking in air from the outside. Because if you have air coming in and it's not tight enough, that means you have dust coming in. Right behind this part right here is your turbo. If you get dust into the turbo wheel, it's gonna dust it, is what it's called, and you're gonna end up buying a new turbo relatively soon. Potentially engine damage as well. So we're gonna go ahead, it's tight, run your finger all the way down. A lot of times you'll go ahead and put this in and you're like, yeah, we're good to go, it's in. The bottom half isn't in. So we're gonna go ahead and make sure that everything's put in the spot there. So this wire that we took off earlier, unfortunately doesn't have a spot for it. What I'm gonna do is just grab a zip tie, just put it up to right here. Doesn't need to be super tight, give it a little bit of slack, but that way it's not just free dangling around here. You can go ahead and cut this guy off if you want to. There's no longer a hole for it to go into. Just gives it a nice spot. I'd recommend probably putting it to this cloth part right here because it's actually heat resistant, because this tube is actually gonna get a little bit warm. So just go ahead and zip tie him out of the way. These guys are all good. If you want to press him back into place, you can. Put this to the side one. If you took that one out, you can put him back into place if you want. But next, we're actually going to start assembling the lid piece to actually get this final seal on and get this Jeep on its way. All right, guys, so next step, we're going to go ahead is get this filter put into it. So S&B sends these guys pre-oiled. You don't have to do anything. If you got the dry filter, it's the same concept, except it's gonna be more of a light gray. It's gonna come with the hose clamp already onto here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna sneak this guy into it. And like everything else in this Jeep, it's a tight fit. Just kind of wedge those guys past that lip, and you're gonna see that the actual tubing on the inside, it's gonna fit right onto it. Easy into place. Like before, make sure that it's sealed all the way around before you start to crank things down and tighten it. Nice and snug. Good to go on that guy. We're gonna double check like before, make sure it's still sealed. It didn't slip while we're doing anything. No, we're good. Next part is going to be your actual cover that goes on here. So like we put that seal on before, make sure it's all flush. One point to pay attention to is where they connect. Make sure they are still connected, one's not overlapping, it's not too short or anything like that. Clear any gunk out of the way that you may have collected But next we're gonna go ahead and peel off this protective covering. What it helps, what I like to do, is S&B. You wanna make sure that everything fits correctly. If you're putting it on and you're like, this doesn't fit, try flipping it around, and that's the direction it's gonna be. So remember that once we get this removed, we're gonna wanna go ahead. 2 steps left. We're gonna go ahead and put the actual plexiglass down. So S&B gives us these little plastic washers. They're just kind of an expansion piece that goes there. We're gonna have all 4 of them in a screw that goes down into it. It's gonna be a Phillips screw. You're literally just gonna tighten it down enough to where it's into place. They make the holes a little bit smaller in the washers, so you have to kind of thread through that. Line everything up. Apply a little bit of pressure on the first one. Don't tighten down, just get it to where it's holding everything into place, because you do have to adjust this guy to actually align these holes, because it is a straight piece of plastic going around a radius bend. So now we have everything kind of pressed in. We're gonna go ahead and adjust it to where it's pressed over the seal evenly on both sides. I'm gonna go ahead and start to tighten down. Now remember, all this is doing is pressing this plexiglass around this bend and onto the seals. Same concept, it does not need to be too tight. That's it for that. So we have everything back together. We got all of our sensors back in. For the 3rd time, always triple check on them. If something's loose, we're gonna find out at some point. It's always nice to catch it ahead of time. Sensors are back into place. Everything's tightened down. All the clamps are tight. We made sure that guy was installed correctly. One thing that's nice is S&B does supply you with this sticker. What it shows on here is when to clean, what to clean with it, what type of filter goes, what the actual filter part number is, so that's nice in case you need to replace it, what type of fluid to clean it with, and how much to actually go onto it. So when it comes down to cleaning your filter, we can do a video on that later. Don't need to right now because it comes pre-oiled. What I did on mine is just find a nice clean spot that's next to it. Right here on the paint, your hood goes down, it's gonna cover it. We're just gonna go ahead and stick that guy right there. And that's literally gonna be it. That way, if you ever go somewhere and they need to replace your filter or tell you that you need to, you don't know what to order, or you just bought this used Jeep and it has all these parts on here you don't know, it helps because that guy is right there, has the part number, has everything that goes to this. All right guys, so now that we got everything back installed, we got our battery terminal placed back in, we have our 2 vacuum sensors placed back into it. Remember, always make sure everything is tight onto those guys. We have our clamps down for the intake actual tubing, and then for the actual side that goes into the turbo resonator. Then we have this clamp, the bolts that come down to hold more sensors on, and then we have more sensors on. So, as you guys know, this guy's pretty technologically advanced. It has lots of sensors. Make sure everything is placed into the correct spot. Like we talked earlier, you wanna make sure that this side one, that blue line in the center of it, you can see it from the outside of the tubing. You wanna make sure that all these guys are snug back into place, because if they're not, the Jeep's not gonna drive correctly. Final step is to put that back plate on top of here. We went ahead and did that. Everything looks good. It's all clean to go. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to shoot a comment down below. Give me a like, it helps out with the videos, and we'll see you next video, guys.